Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Go Wild Avian Nutrition Podcast. This is episode 4, Enriching the Senses. You probably have heard some things about enrichment, but we thought that tonight would be a really good way to show all the different types of enrichment that exist, and maybe it'll spark one thing that you can change in how you care for your birds. So I'm your host tonight, Dr. Jason Crean. Dr. Voltura couldn't join us tonight. She is neck deep in gram stains, I believe. So she will be hopefully with us next time. We have a really expert panel tonight, and I'm really excited that the planets aligned and everybody was available. That does not happen with all these busy people. But I'm going to have them just quickly introduce themselves and give you a little bit of background about who they are. So, Laura, why don't we start with you? Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Jason. It's great to be on here with all these other guests as well. My name is Lara Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to empower animals and the people that care for them.
Thank you. Dr. Shelton.
Hi, I am Melissa Shelton. I'm a veterinarian and I can't say specialized in avian, but had a very strong interest in avian medicine my entire career. But a huge part of my specialty now is in veterinary aromatic medicine. So basically essential oils for different needs. And yes, birds can use them.
Yeah, there's a lot of myths, so hopefully those
Mhm.
will those will emerge tonight, and we can debunk those. Uh, Thank you for being here, Robbin.
I'm Robbin Sullivan. I'm the owner of the Leather Elves, co-owner of the Leather Elves, and we've been creating enrichment in the form of toys for over 25 years. And I've been speaking on enrichment just about as long. And when Jason, thank you, when you called and said, did I want to do this? I was so excited because my very first presentation was called Enrichment Use Your Common Senses. And so this is near and dear to my heart. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and common sense is something that I think many of us lack when it comes to approaching enrichment, and sometimes we just need to talk it through. I know I've learned a ton from all of you, and I continue to learn um, because birds in particular don't sense the world the same way we do, and so hopefully some of that will come out. Just a quick overview. The senses allow organisms like our birds or any animal, including us, to respond to stimuli in your environment. And if you don't respond to stimuli, there's bad things ahead, right? You can't avoid a predator, you can't pick the right food, things like that. So it's really important that we look at the senses as the way that the animals that we keep sense the world around them, and that they have evolved these senses specifically to survive. And if they don't perceive these different elements in the world around them, they're not adapted well for their environment. So the senses include vision, which is sight, and I know a number of you have probably seen some of the research that has come out about how birds see more than we do when it comes to the light, UV light, and things of that nature, and how they even perceive food items differently by seeing UV light reflectance, which is something we don't generally see ourselves. Um, Gustation, which is taste. A fun way to, at Thanksgiving dinner next week, make sure you slide that gustation word into the conversation. You'll look real smart with your relatives, and say, this gustates amazing. Gustation is taste, and birds definitely taste different than we do. They have fewer taste receptors, but they definitely perceive taste of different items different than we do. Olfaction is smell. And generally, birds have a smaller olfactory bulb in their brain, but we were talking before we came on, and it doesn't seem to impact some birds. So we'll talk about that as well. And then somatosensation is touch, and how and we know birds touch a lot with their beaks and tongues, not as much with their feet. So there's definitely a difference in how they are sensing those things. And then audition, which is hearing. And we know parrots can hear because they can mimic some sounds, and they tend to mimic the ones we don't want them to mimic over and over and over again. So what we thought we'd do is kind of just have some conversations. All of us have thrown some pictures on each sense slide, and we're just going to talk about them, tell some stories, and maybe this will spark something in how you can add something to your bird's life as well. Does anybody want to start? Well, you're worse than my students. They all just sit there, no, please don't pick on me.
I will. Oh, go ahead,
No,
Robbin.
I was just going to say, the picture of the Amazons there, I included that because to me, sight not only means the things that they're seeing, but what they're seeing in their environment as well. You know, when we were talking before we came on, and we were talking about when we have animals in human care, whether it's birds, mammals, you know, whatever you're keeping, we take away a lot of their opportunity for senses, for use of their senses. And with this picture, I put this one in because I think it's important to have some space that is kind of blocked off, or so that they've got, you know, when we were designing exhibits with rehab birds or with collection birds in wildlife centers, a lot of times it was important to have a sight break. And I think when we think about vision, I think that's important too.
Yeah, I agree. And I posted this. I have this picture down in the bottom right of my green wing and my blue front. And I posted that because they're in an aviary and you can see them both looking around. Suki in the background is eating. I have found that aviaries, depending on the bird and its history, can be such an amazing form of enrichment for the bird because it provides so much visual enrichment and changing and naturally visual enrichment in addition to all the other senses.
And that's mental stimulation. And I think sometimes we say the word stimulation when it comes to birds, and it's a negative, like because they can become overstimulated by certain things. But they need mental stimulation. They need their brain to be working. They need to be thinking and interacting with their environment. So I think having aviaries where they have this whole new environment around them is very different. Like my cockatoo Sirius, he has his own room and it's all patio doors, and so he has a big wide span. But it's very different if I walk him 6 feet to his outside enclosure. So even though he can see a lot or the same things, it's very different for him to be outside and interact with the environment that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, you know, with birds that are outside, if you have the opportunity to have them in an outdoor aviary, you can't move that aviary most times. But for people who have birds in their homes and they're in cages, you know, I've gotten a lot of pushback over the years about moving cages around. I'm a huge fan of it because when you think about what our birds would be seeing in the wild, you know, it's different things every day, all kinds of visual sensory input. And if we've got a cage in one spot, you know, I challenge you all to get inside the cage if you can. Hopefully you can, and look around at what your birds are seeing. And imagine I like to think about it as being in a cubicle. If any of you have ever worked in a cubicle, it's hell. I'm sorry, but for me, it was anyway. I made a window in my cubicle so that I would have something to look at and I would change the pictures on it. Okay, so I am crazy. We've established that already, but moving cages around, you know, people, oh no, they'll get freaked out. Jason, they'll be overstimulated. Honestly, think if your bird is in the cage for a long periods of time, think about moving the cage around if you can.
Yeah, you know what, Jason or Robin, that just surprises me that you've gotten pushback on that. Because with stagnant environments comes a lot of behavior issues.
Yeah.
And moving the cages around, um, I take my birds every day. Well, it depends on the bird, and everybody moves one cage to the left or a cage across for a totally different, where's this over here and a different view out different windows. So I'm all for that as well.
And in the zoo world too, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, Laura and Jason. I'm not sure, Melissa, what your zoo experience is, but um, some facilities have exhibits where animals do get moved in and out, and it's a set of it's the tiger, hoofstock, a bird, but they can see one another. They're in adjacent enclosures, but they do move them. So now, when we get to the other senses, you've got this tiger who is in an enclosure where there was, a diker or some form of hoofstock. They're getting all that olfaction. They're getting, different visuals, and it's done on a grand scale. But I think we forget to do it sometimes in our homes. Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the zoos I worked with. It's funny when you brought up tigers because that's the first thing I thought of. Tigers seem that the hypothesis for this story is they can smell each other. So when we get to smell, like this is one of the things. But um, there was a relative of this tiger, and we could not the zoo, the staff could not get this tiger to come out of its behind the scenes enclosure, and presumably because she could smell a relative. And there's probably some kind of evolutionary adaptation in there to limit inbreeding. So if you smell your relatives, you go someplace else. But when they moved her to a different enclosure, no problem. And then when they moved her to a different zoo, no problem. So,
Mm.
you have to wonder, what are they sensing? And one of the ways they did get her to come out was essential oils. So, attracting just, and it was just curiosity as well as maybe calming, because I remember lavender was one of them.
hmm.
And it could be just that it's just, it somehow interacts with the nervous system and helps them not be not exhibit the behaviors that you want that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, I'll pipe in based off of that then. So, one thing that always has kind of fascinated me is the difference between like the birds, born precocious or born with or hatched. Sorry, I'm very into the born thing right now. But uh, you know, eyes closed versus eyes open, and what does that mean for the rest of our sensory, or like what? Um, I think to me, I am always fascinated watching, like I have peacocks and chickens and guineas and geese, and just the difference between them and some of my, the canaries or the other species. And so I feel like the birds that hatch with their eyes closed are more, more, it's just like everything else. You lose one sense, the other ones are stronger, right? And I feel like there's always that connection to just kind of think about it. I don't know. It probably doesn't like really matter on if we will provide them with sensory enrichment for vision or not. But I do see like the way my chickens respond to visual stimuli is often very different than what my parrots used to react to in visual stimuli. So I think species to species and, different categories, we can also see different ways to enrich that vision. And let's see, I think I had another so I used to do house calls when I was doing a bunch of veterinary work. Still now I'm mostly just in the essential oil company, and when we do the house calls, so many people would say, oh, I can't bring the bird out of this room, right? Because they would freak out leaving that safe space, the only place they've ever been, the only cage they've ever been. And that's not very healthy for them either. And so we'd always talk about that then too. So if your bird tends to be that one that's like, oh, I can't leave this room. I can't leave my cage. I can't, like, and I see it with other animals too. Like we'll have a certain cat that, you can't go on a different level of the house. It freaks out. It's like, that's its zone. That's its comfort level, but it's not healthy for, like we said, these birds should be foraging. They should be going miles a day. Same with other animals. They should be hunting. They should be doing things all day long. And if they can't even leave a room, we need to kind of consider that enrichment to try to get them out of that, you know, hibernation mode of I can only be in this zone.
Yeah, and
If
I think we reinforce that, unfortunately, a lot of the times because we think that our animals are just these fragile babies, right? And they're not. These are resilient wild animals who can tolerate a lot more than we give them credit for. And I think I think what you just described is something that is more the norm than it probably should be. And we think we're doing them a favor by keeping them safe, but it's exposed, it's a lot like human children,
Right.
kids that have never, whose mom doesn't let them do anything, and then they go out into the world, you know.
I've always found people related it to dogs the best.
Yeah,
People understand puppies need to be socialized. And so
yes.
if I almost, not everybody understood their kids or, not going to say they're easy, but, definitely everybody almost seems to understand that puppies need socializing and there's age, um, categories, where they develop like maybe that substrate preference of where they're going to pee and poop for the rest of their life. Or, so I don't know if we've seen the research of what birds do with that, but I'm sure there's probably a time frame for them too. And it's important that they get that same level of stimulation of socialization of some sort.
a lot of people will hear me say, keep your animal used to change, because, and you can do that through enrichment, and especially the slides we're getting ready to go through. It's not setting our birds' future up for success if we're not keeping them used to change, because change is going to happen whether you're ready for it or not.
Yeah, and along those lines too, Laura, the rigid schedule. We have people who have their birds or whatever animal on a very rigid schedule. And, the freeway happens on the way home from work and you get there late and now you've got a screaming bird because you didn't, arrive home at the right time, or you didn't, provide the treat at this certain time. And so that rigidity causes issues, can cause behavioral issues. And then I was going to say too, when you were talking about what they're seeing, and being in a different room, Melissa, not taking them out. I did a home consult one time, and the woman had an eclectus that the way her condo was set up, there was a hallway straight down, and the living room was like a T on the end of the hallway. And she had two play stands. One had originally been straight down, you look down the hallway and it was there, and the other one was off to the side. And she moved the one that was straight down the hallway to the other side. So now the bird absolutely refused to go from one to the other. And she was really frustrated. I have these two beautiful stands, he's not using them. And what the issue was as a prey species, this bird was unable to see what was coming down that hallway. So it was, like flying across a canyon and not knowing, what you were going to find at the other side. So we just did some movement of the play stands, and it fixed that behavior, fixed it for her. But I think that sight piece is important for that reason as well. And when you're providing enrichment, you need to think about that initial response. It's still enriching, even if it's a back away. But there is that piece that plays into it.
And we have to meet these animals where they're at, right? We have, and that's, I'm sure, one of the reasons that birds are relinquished more than some other animals is because of these unrealistic expectations people have for them. But we have to look at their biology, we have to look at their ecology, and their natural history. Like, how have they evolved over countless generations to do what they do? And how can we use that understanding to give them the best life, right? Because we can do that. We can give them fantastic lives in our home. They can thrive, right, Lara? We just saw I got Pete. I know you were using that quote again because we saw it on Facebook. But animals in the wild survive. The wild is a really rough place to live. It's not a paradise, contrary to some Disney films. But when it comes to, these animals, I always look and say, okay, is this a canopy bird? Are they up high? Do they ever come down to the ground? Like a lot of birds, they just don't ever need to come down to the ground. So what are they drinking? They're drinking from rain catches up in the trees, right? They're drinking tea, which has all these plant components in it, who are, stewing all day in the sun. And that's what they're consuming. Or they're drinking from ponds or lakes or rivers where there's lots of tannins in the water because there's leaves leaching stuff, and if you don't believe me, just sit out in front and look at the birds on your curb and they'll be drinking from puddles that are full of leaves. I mean, that's just what they do. And then we bring them in, and anything that goes in their water, they flip out because that's all they've ever seen is just this clear water, right? So like everything we do, we have to think about what's going on in their natural environments because they've evolved over long periods of time to figure out how to live in those environments and use those resources. And a perfect example is the center picture here. These are beauty berries that we grow here. And I just cut an entire branch and throw it in with the aviary birds. And 10 minutes goes by and I go back out there and it's like in the cartoons where the branch, like what's left is just spinning, like it's gone. They've just annihilated it. I've got some footage of my mouse birds just chowing down as if it's a buffet. But they're seeing those berries in a different way because nobody touches those berries until they're ripe and then they descend upon them. So there's something there that they can detect, and it's not just color, it's also UV light reflectance because that's different than just the color that we see. But there's definitely an element to that birds perceive. And then looking for naturalistic food items that they would eat. Palm nuts are something that a lot of parrots consume. And if you don't have palm nuts grown in your neighborhood because you don't live in Florida, we freeze dry them so that we can sell them and send them to people. But this is a friend of mine's Cape parrot, and the first thing it goes for in all of this food that she offers are those palm nuts. And my cockatoo, same thing. First thing, those palm nuts. So there's something there that we need to trust about their environment, and there's something to that, and it's most likely how they're visualizing these foods before they can even get close to them.
So, Jason, real quickly, when you're creating a food blend or a foraging blend, do you take that into account?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's I hate to bring up the word, but there's a pellet manufacturer, and they're all they're Fruity Pebbles colored.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those artificial colors are there so that the human will buy them, right? And I don't know that there's a bird out there that doesn't leave one of the colors behind because it just, for some reason, doesn't identify with that color. I don't feed pellets, so I'll offer a little bit of Tops pellets because they're cold pressed and they're not processed. But even those can be a tough sell sometimes for some birds because they're pelleted grass, alfalfa and stuff like that, and that's not to all birds. That's not as appetizing. There are birds who eat grasses like cockatiels and things like that who go for those more readily, I've found. But it takes a little bit of coaching. But when I'm looking at making a food blend, like the upper right corner here is, we call it the haunted house, but it's got dried palm nuts, fruit, and the leaves here are banana leaves, and then those other curly things are all banana stems, and the midrib of the leaf is those little looks like a cat outline, a silhouette of a cat head kind of with little ears. Those are all parts of banana plants, that because the entire banana plant is edible, and it's got lots of fiber, but it's the textures and the taste that I really want to get the birds to interact with. So we can freeze dry this, and that way anybody can offer it to their bird. But the banana stems, and you can see they've got little sections in there, which is where the water uptake comes in the stem. It's almost spongy, and some of the birds just love to just shred those. They just love to shred them. Whether it's texture or taste is hard to say, but we try to look at what kind of things are they eating and what can we incorporate. So it might be like whole seed heads or whole grain heads, like what you see. I'm jumping ahead a little bit in this big center picture up here. A lot of birds eat the seed or the grains or whatever it is right off of the plant. So why not include the whole thing instead of just individual seeds or individual pieces of grain? Just give them the whole thing and let them do the foraging. So there's a lot of crossover between these slides, right? Because it's rare that birds are only using one sense, right? Like all animals, they're probably using a combination of things to get them, to get what they need. But yeah, we try to take into account things that they would interact with in the environment. And it could be flowers, buds, sticks, bark, mushrooms. We were talking about mushrooms earlier, that a lot of birds will eat mushrooms right off the side of trees. Insects, like mealworms and things like that, they eat larvae. The first slide, I chose this for a reason because people often don't believe me that parrots eat bugs. I'm like, they eat bugs. They definitely eat bugs. And Bonnie Zimmerman from the Indonesian Parrot Project said, she's like, I've literally seen cockatoos just pull larvae right out of the bark and eat it. So, we know they do, but all of that offers different tastes, and those tastes most likely, just like vision, correspond to different nutrients. And so when people say feed the rainbow, which kind of makes it's kind of cringy to me, but it is true. Like the more different things, and I'm not talking about different color pellets, I'm talking about different color whole foods, like real food, so that they're getting different color fruits, different color veggies, different color sprouts and things like that. You're gonna cover all your bases if you're offering a diverse diet like that. So we have gustation, taste.
So the eclectus down on the bottom right corner there, that's Pepe. And Pepe was a resident at Philadelphia Zoo. And when he came in, he was relinquished. And when he came in, he was bald all around the neck. He was overpreening. It was a huge issue. And they weren't sure. He wasn't allowed to be on exhibit because he wasn't pretty. But the keepers there worked with him, and this was one of the techniques they used, and they would put very few of what they figured out to be his favorite in a mix, like what he's going through. And so it was definitely what he preferred, so the taste that he was looking for. And then they could prolong the feed time and therefore decrease the amount of time he had to be plucking. And after it was probably almost a year, Pepe was fully feathered. And 100%, his diet wasn't horrific when he came to the zoo. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrific. With an improved diet and a huge increase in the amount of enrichment he was getting, his feather condition improved 100%. So I feel like, and Lara and I have talked about this before, the tie between enrichment and behavior change. I mean, it's amazing the things you can do by providing significant enrichment.
I agree 100%. I tell people a lot of times that when talking about behavior, in order to change one behavior, you have to replace it with another. And every single one of my behavior modification plans involves foraging because it's a great occupier of time.
And they've
It,
evolved to do that, right? They spend most of their day doing that.
yeah.
Yeah, we actually have created a group, and I know a lot of the members are listening, called the Foraging Flock, and we meet once a month online, and we talk about foraging because it is, I mean, it's essential. You know, you can provide all kinds of wonderful enrichment, but like you say, Laura, it has that foraging piece has to be included in all of it. Yeah, I think it's really important.
Are you guys finding also like one thought I had with the collectus was by having to dig through all of those other food particles to find it, are you getting like little tastes of it along the way where maybe like, oh, maybe that wasn't so bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a great way to introduce. I mean, I find like, so Laura, don't shoot me. It's so bribery works, in my opinion. It's, okay, I'm going to lure you over here with this, and you're going to find out that this is really tasty. You really enjoy this. And now, oh, you're at this really cool shreddable toy, or you're at this really cool destructible toy. And sometimes it'll get them there, that taste piece, Melissa, like, oh, what's this? I haven't tried this before. And I just found it here. And now it leads to another sensation, another activity. So yeah, don't shoot me.
No.
I did not just say that luring was okay.
Yeah, and I think a big a big thing that's not often talked about is portion control,
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
because portion control encourages them to eat more of the diversity, more of the new things. And if they can pick out things and satiate themselves just by picking those things out, they're not going to get what they need. And so, I'll hear people all every day, and I got into it. I don't usually let myself get into it, but I got into it yesterday on Facebook. That someone said seed is toxic and seed kills the liver. No, no, it does not. Seed is not toxic. Seed does not do that. A seed only diet is not balanced, and therefore it can lead to health problems. But anything that's an all diet
Mhm.
is problematic. Um, I cringe at the 80, 70, 80% pellet recommendation. I cringe at that. That is not a beneficial thing for birds. They need different things to interact with. They need diversity, but they need portion control so that yeah, well, and how do you say it, Robbin? Food is love. So we often think that if we give our parrotlet 2 cups of food, it's got all it needs. No, it'll pick out what it wants, and then it's not getting everything it needs. So a tablespoon of food for a parrotlet is, in the morning is more than enough to get it through the day, and then give it some dry food in the evening, a little bit of dry food in the evening. But definitely we tend to overfeed, and that's problematic.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation about that with a vet tech at the center today, how people look at food as comfort and they're
Yeah.
feeding the dry mix dishes. Jason, you would have cringed if you saw the dish I pulled out the other day. It was like an inch thick of the dry mix. And I was like, and then so I posted a picture of what each dish should look like. And Rocky, my Moluccan, is one of my pickiest eaters. And I can tell he's eating the dry mix because I can tell how much is gone when I see it the next day. And I can also tell because he's liking to go over and dunk it in his water. So I see the evidence.
Yeah. Well, and then there's I mean, the difference between you fall into a favorites trap too, when you're talking about using food as a reinforcer for behavior change. You've got, I've had people say to me, well, I gave him 4 grapes. Okay, so 4 grapes for you is not a whole lot, but 4 grapes, the way I describe it is, it's like having a chocolate chip cookie the size of a banquet table.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Not
now
a
you
whole
ruined the
lot.
whole show.
Well,
Like, oh,
just like this, I
cookie,
used to
the
tell
size of a
people that
big-
if you gave me ice cream every day, I would eventually get sick of it. I used to tell people that, and then I went, oh, it's such a lie. So I was okay with it. But you know, that the favorites trap, you fall into that because eventually that thing that was motivating is if you do it too much, it's not going to be motivating anymore. And by getting your bird used to doing like, you know, like Pepe's doing, they're sifting through, foraging through, and not a ton of food. I mean, that's the zookeepers felt that food was love. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit much food for him. But going through the food, you will very easily be able to determine what they're eating, or you should be able to determine what they're eating, what they're not eating.
Yeah, and I'm happy if they're just interacting with certain foods.
Mhm.
You know, in the middle top middle picture, you'll see some citrus in there, and I just want him chewing on the peel. I'm not real concerned about him eating the flesh. The peel has bioflavonoids in it. That's that white stuff that we typically peel off, but
Mhm.
that's the stuff I want him to chew on and enjoy because he gets benefit from that. So, you know, I'm not super concerned about him eating the flesh of the orange as much as I am the peel because it's got health benefits. But I know what he eats. So if I give him a teaspoon of the sprouts and then a teaspoon of diced fruit, and then the rest is all just diced, you know, just broken up veggies or whatnot. I know that he'll eat a bit of each, and then most of this is gone. But that's because I've monitored him for a long period of time. But I'm not giving him a couple cups of fruit or a couple cups of sprouts each day. Like he doesn't need all that food because it's a waste, and he'll just pick out what he likes. And with the bowls at the bottom, those are feeding over 100 birds. And so the 6 really long dishes on the right, those go into my 800 square foot aviary that has at least about 40 different species in there, everything from little tiny finches to fruit doves to Victoria crown pigeons that are turkey sized, you know, partridges, things like that. And I have to monitor how much food is left each day so that I can adjust it so that no one in there is not getting what they should. So it takes a little bit of practice. And then when it gets cooler in the evenings, they start to eat more. So then I have to adjust it for that. But it's really watching what the birds are eating, how quickly they're eating, you know, how quickly their bowls are disappeared. But all of this food that you see here in that bottom center picture is completely gone. There's like some wheatgrass left over stuck to the bottom of the bowl. That's it. Everything else is gone. But that's because I'm watching to see what they're eating. And like the toucan bowls are on the right side, those square bowls, and you know I have to monitor like if they're just picking out the blueberries and they're leaving everything else, what do? Right? You have to portion control and scale back on that because blueberries are very beneficial, right? They've got a ton of health benefits, bioflavonoids, all these antioxidants that are really beneficial, but they can't live on blueberries alone. So you have to make sure that, you know, but keeping them used to change, like Lara Joseph said, is really, really important. I don't put live mealworms in there every day. So, you know, they see them now and then during a week. Um, and then, you know, they'll see more blueberries, sometimes blackberries, sometimes raspberries. And, you know, I try to randomize it so that they don't know what they're going to get. When I don't randomize it is when they have chicks, because then you have to be somewhat consistent so that they know, I know I'm going to have the right food to feed my chicks. So you don't want to deviate too much, especially with toucans who, you know, they'll eat their chicks pretty readily. So you have to make sure that they've got plenty of food and the right types of food. And for them, I don't feed them greens at all, except for when they have chicks, because we have data that shows that they increase the fiber intake so that they can feed that to their chicks, presumably to jumpstart the microbiome in the gut or something probably along those lines. But you know, it's all from watching and learning from them, and then making sure that you know they've got choices, but not too many, because you want them to eat. You know, you want them to have as much diversity as possible.
I'll pop in and just remind everybody too that, you know, when everybody freaks out about essential oils, remember that all of these citrus rinds have essential oils in them.
Yes.
So if a bird's chewing through that or anything else, I mean, they're already exposed to essential oils. So for everybody's like, I can't do it. Every food they eat practically is going to have some form of essential oil in its process of it. And so I always kind of crack up with you and the tea thing that we talk about, the tannins in the water. I'm like, there's essential oils in the water too. Like all the plants that fall in the pond that the birds are drinking from, or, and I watch my chickens do this all the time because, they go to the puddles. They love to drink out of the puddles, and it's tons of leaves and tannins and probably some cow poop and who knows, but they're exposed to a lot of different things that we think would be gross, or oh no, the internet told us it was harmful. No, it's the unnatural parts of it that are harmful. So I love that when people still give them rinds, or give them the banana with the peel on it. People were freaking out because I fed my cow a banana whole. She loves bananas, but they love the peels. And they're like, you can feed the peels? I'm like, I sure as hell hope you could, because like how is any animal ever going to get a banana if you can't get through the peel, if that was toxic or something, So, but yeah, no, it's so important for them to have the whole exposure.
Yeah, and I mean, we as humans, we're not good at much, right?
No.
Like chewing and swallowing a banana peel, like we're not good at that. Our teeth aren't built for that, but most animals are, right? Most animals are not going to peel something. They're going to burrow through it. Like when you look at papayas or coconuts, these animals just burrow into them to eat the insides, and they're covered in goop. And I mean, it's disgusting looking, but we tend to anthropomorphize, which you all knew I was going to bring this word up at some point tonight, but we tend to anthropomorphize and say, well, if we don't do it, then it must be an inconvenience for them. But if you look at the bananas that I have in that bottom bowl, those bottom bowls, they're in the peel. The peel's still there. And so, and that's about all that's left is the thin peel. But you can tell, I can see the little beak marks in the peel. They are eating through the peel. So there's something to be said. And when you look at nutrients that are right within that peel, or in the peel, or just below the peel, there's a reason why these plants are luring animals with these really nice fruits to get them to spread their seeds, because plants can't move, they can't have sex, right? They have to figure out some way to get their seeds elsewhere, and so they got to lure the animals with nutrients, and that's how they do it. So there's a reason. There's always a reason.
Well, and I think too, when you're trying to feed a diverse diet, it's like, let's be honest, it's easier to not cut everything up in tiny pieces and, peel everything. And it's part of again, like we were talking about before, it prolongs that feed time. And it's natural foraging to have to take things out of a husk or take things out of, a peel. And it's very natural behavior that is what what we should be looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and teas, and I didn't put this tea picture on there, but thank you, Dr. Shelton. I didn't put the tea picture on there, but I've been using tea since Dr. Becker brought it to me 20 some years ago and said we're missing an opportunity. And the reason she knew about teas was because when she interned as a veterinarian at the Berlin Zoo in Germany, they had tea regimens for all these different animals. And in European zoos, it's very common to offer all these different teas. And I'm like, why aren't we doing this? This is really a smart idea, and it's a good way to trick your birds into better nutrition. And then we saw the benefits. Birds stop plucking, birds calm down, they stop screaming, just from things like lavender, chamomile, red clover combinations, things like that. And it's probably because of the combination of oils and other bioactive components that are in each of these teas. And I often tell people, if you have an oil slick across your tea, you're doing something right, because there's that oil, floating at the surface, and there's a reason for that. So thank you for including that, because I think that what our animals drink is often most ignored. We focus so much on diet, and yet there's a huge opportunity with just giving them a few sips of something in their water.
Well, and when we're talking about natural behavior and what you're observing them doing, we'll throw out the other SAT word. Our SAT is still a thing. Contra freeloading. Their studies show that animals prefer to work for their food. And I know there's somebody listening going, nope, my bird's lazy. He won't do it. He will do it. It's just a matter of not, for lack of a better term, not giving in, and providing things in whole form, providing, that foraging activity and, encouraging them to behave that way.
And we have to encourage it. We have to offer these things and be persistent. And I often say the training is more of for the human than it is for the animal. I was just out with friends, and this kid was at a neighboring table at a restaurant, whining that he wanted chicken fingers. And no matter where I go, that's all these kids are eating are chicken fingers, and or chicken tenders or whatever your region of the U.S. calls them, or wherever you're at. But of course, that's all they're going to eat if you just give in and say, okay, fine, because and then they'll say, well, that's all he'll eat. Well, no, that's not all he'll eat. He'll eat more things, but you have to be persistent and you have to have some boundaries. And if it's tough love, Robbin. I mean, I know I've heard you say those words before. It's not abuse. It's tough love. You have to have some boundaries, and the birds will not starve. They will eat what you want them to. They will interact what you want them to. It just takes some persistence on your part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of birds have people well trained.
Oh yeah, no question there. Smell is controversial, mainly because the research has shown us that part of the brain in many birds is small, but we're learning more and more about the avian brain and how differently it's wired to the mammal brain. And I'm really hoping more research emerges over the next several years about what's really going on up here in that avian brain. And I'll let Robbin start here, because Robbin was the one that convinced me to open my mind a little bit more to the fact that parrots do have use smell a little bit more than maybe I thought in the
So, well, I'm glad you listened. Uh, Success. Okay. I put this picture in not because I want you to see how old I've become, but this is it's a kaka, and this is in Auckland in New Zealand. And we went into the enclosure, and I'm gonna blame jet lag that I let that bird that I didn't know get that close to my face. But this was my big aha moment when it came to olfaction. It was because I've been telling people, think about how your bird smells. Think about, yes, the receptors are different and smaller, but there's got to be a reason that an Amazon smells like an Amazon and a macaw smells like a macaw. And Melissa was saying you can tell the smell of the bird before you even open. You can tell what kind of bird it is before you open the crate, right? But this bird, we walked into the enclosure. The bird put its nares up against my skin and my hair. You could hear it inhale, and then it turned and preened and went about its business. But there was definitely that like investigatory phase, and then I'm sure there was some not so essential oil on my face that helped with the preening activity. But there was that. I was so excited. If I had known that bird better, I probably would have been like jumping up and down, but I didn't want to do that with birds I didn't know. But that olfactory sensation, that was my aha moment when I said, okay, I'm going to put this in my enrichment toolbox because it is so important. And while I'm rambling, I put that picture of the basil in because we've done a bunch of work with scent trails and getting birds from want to utilize more of their enclosure, to utilize more of their space, taking things like basil chili peppers, rosemary, and just taking it and putting it along a perch, you can create scent trails and move birds, animals from point A to point B. And it works really well with visually impaired birds, and birds that don't exercise enough. So yeah, I love it.
I loved interacting with cacas. We fed wild cacas in New Zealand, and it was such a thrill to see them come in, their characters. And yeah, we grow a lot of herbs, and let them go to flower and seed so that we can just take the whole thing and throw it in and let them interact. I mean, the smell is amazing. um,
And planting a garden, I mean, that's an easy, a lot of us have gardens. If,
yeah,
even those of us in the frozen north have gardens. And it's a great way, plant a small herb box in your house.
yep.
And one of the coolest enrichments I ever saw, it wasn't birds, it was elephants. And the elephant manager at the Baltimore Zoo put a garden above head level, so the elephant had to reach up with its trunk. But it wasn't about pulling up and eating any of it. It was straight up olfaction. It was all about the olfactory sensation. And again, it can keep them busy for quite a while. So
I like that idea. I mean, I moved into a different house, and the person I bought it from obviously had a green thumb, which I do not.
mhm.
And there's all kinds of awesome herbs in the garden, and my dogs are out there every day eating it.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I'll jump in here with essential oils in the smell part because that's probably what most people think of. But for me, essential oils, they're physical, they're obviously they smell, but there's so much more to it because I'll find even just myself wearing something, like you said, it's almost like that scent trail.
Mhm.
I attract animals that hate humans all the time by wearing essential oils. And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. Um, whether it's a donkey who has never let a human touch it before, it is like up in my junk. And I'm like, what? Like, all I got is my deodorant on today. Um, and well, and I had my rat. So I'm like, either it's the essential oils or the rat. Um, but there's so much more to smell and olfaction than we could ever possibly know. Um, it is physical, not just a sense, and so like when I was trying to wrap my head around, like why, it's kind of like recognizing why teas would be so natural in the wild. It was my same aha moment of why is essential oil so freaking wonderful? They're everywhere, just like the teas would be, just like plants will be. And so even like when I was training a lot with eggs and egg autopsies and all the necropsies, and they're absorbing essential oils through the eggshells too. They're porous. And so if you got like I put the picture of the nest in the evergreen tree, that's a really strong smell. Or like the birds that hollow out a log, there's a lot of essential oils within wood chips. It is not just the smell of it, which is huge, but there's physical reactions to certain smells, whether it calms your stomach, or we've seen peristalsis motion, like if you got crop stasis. And right now my world seems revolving around poultry, but you can actually increase. I've done it with parrots when I was more active in that sector, peppermints and the mints and spearmints and things. Whether it's in an herb or in a tea or an essential oil or even being diffused, it's amazing the physical aspects that those bring. And so like I always was like, eggs are getting it too, when we would do the little egg necropsies and it had like maybe a fungal infection in the shell, in the membrane. It wouldn't have had that if it would have, I think, in nature with essential oils, with plant products that would be antifungal and antibacterial around them at all times. And so plant matter in that aspect too, it's so much more than just, oh look, it smells like basil. I mean, it's antihistamine action. There's so much physical part to it, emotional, physical. Um, so never think that it's just smells nice. It's physical, it's mental, there's so many parts to it. And I love with the parrots that smell you too, because like I feel like when people come and meet our farm animals, we have a farm animal rescue, and the horses will be sniffing them just like the parrots did. They'll give big sniffs, and they want to smell your breath. And people don't recognize that that's such an important aspect to their emotional reckoning with a human too. Like, what are you? How does your breath smell? What have you been eating today? Are you a predator? They can tell if your breath, have you been eating horse? I'm pretty sure they would know. One of my cows knows if I wear cowhide gloves. She's fine if I had deer hide gloves on, but if I had cowhide gloves on, you ain't touching me. you know. So I think this will be one of those aspects where there's research to be done for millennia probably that we'll never really quite understand it fully. We get a lot of deer carcasses donated to us during hunting season for the dogs and cats and different things to make food, and we have a really nice family of bald eagles that live on our property too. And so I could tell they were scouting out the deer and they couldn't see it. It was kind of hidden and all this, but they were circling really low and really close to where somebody had dropped off the carcasses for us. And so I'm like, well, I'll put it out for you. And, there's something, it wasn't just visual because it was covered up. So, even though we think of the vultures being probably more scent oriented because they have those giant nostrils, but definitely the eagles are not just that eagle eye. They're smelling something too. I'm pretty convinced of that. So
Yeah, there's a lot of I think we take for granted that things just smell nice, but we don't know how those odor molecules interact with the nervous system. And when I tell people, if you're traveling with your bird, throw a handful of lavender flowers in the crate with your bird, and they will not get car sick. They will not, it's just amazing how calming it is. And the lower left picture here, these are all food foraging items that Australian birds would be getting, cockatoos. And it's eucalyptus and gum nuts and things like that, and they smell amazing. But there's a reason for that because of those oils. And in the picture next to it, that's our holiday blend that we just released today, and that's got all kinds of spices, allspice. It's got star anise, cinnamon. All of those things have oils in them that make them smell really good. So you can simmer that and safely smell up your house nicely and not worry about your birds succumbing to that. And then these are ginger flowers at the bottom that we freeze dry. We just started doing that. We're going to be offering those soon. And they smell amazing, but there's also a lot of tactile, which will bring me to the next piece here. And we're going to zip through these because I know that we're already over time, but touch is important to birds. And there's all kinds of different ways to get that. We all know some of our birds like certain types of toys. Robbin, you have the birchwood toys and some of the other woods and things like that they interact with. But there's a lot of different things that we could be offering that would allow them to interact with more textures and things like that. And all of that helps stimulate them and get them thinking.
I used to provide, I don't know if you see the umbrella cockatoo there, that's Rico. I used to provide large hanging baskets when I had that huge aviary full of different fruits, vegetables, and herbs. And there's Rico. He used to love to fly to it. And he's actually sitting there picking it up with his feet.
Yeah, I've seen some cool things where people just put big rocks, like big river rock, in a bin and they just put stuff in there and the birds have to like pick up the rocks and move them around to get to stuff. I mean, and the herbs, growing herbs is so easy. And I know, Lara, you're going to tell me I'm a liar, but I promise you, anybody can grow herbs right on a
Somebody
windowsill.
show me what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, I'll need some lessons too. Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
I'm all about now wild foraging because it's the only shit I can grow. I can't. Yeah. So
Yeah.
all purslane and
Yeah, purslane's a great one, and it grows like a weed.
yes.
I mean, they call it a weed, but it's completely editable. We see a lot of doves and things like that come, and they must be eating the seeds from that. But um, growing microgreens is probably the easiest thing for anybody to do because you can't let them go more than a few days, right? Like after 7 days, they're ready. Like that's when you seize on them. So there's not enough time for you to kill them. So microgreens, I tell everybody, they're more nutritious than the adult version of that plant. So like you get so much more bang for your buck and you're spending a lot less time having to try to grow things. But all those have different tastes and textures and things like that. The seed mix in the middle here is the one that we have that I formulated so that there's lots of um, seed heads so that birds are not just picking out a seed, they're actually interacting with the whole head and it's making them work for it and hold it and things like that. Um, a lot of fun stuff there. But I love toys like what Robbin offers at the Leather Elves because there's so many different things that they can interact with, and it's not just about color; it's about texture, type, coconut, birch, like all that different stuff, and you can tell that the birds interact with it for a reason.
Well, and we really try, and it's, my personal philosophy. We really try to do as many textures as we can in one offering so that it's not, you can see the black cockatoo on the bottom has that's a mahogany pod, or actually I think it's a gum tree pod and an acrylic bead, which they're never going to get anywhere with that acrylic bead, but it's just a different texture. And then the blue throat on the right, I put that in there just because temperature, like different temperature things can be very enriching. It's especially well, with birds of prey, freezing things in ice, and then they kind of either have to work it out or wait, which is fun to watch. Let's be honest, sometimes enrichment is for us. But on a hot day, that blue throat's down in Texas, that's an option. But trying to get as many textures as you can into one offering is really, I think, the way to go.
Yep. And I mean, I've seen Lara do it. I've seen a lot of people do it. Just throwing a bunch of stuff into a bowl or a bucket and just letting them, rifle through it. Anything, keeping them used to change, like Lara says, is so critical. Stop making life easy for your birds. You got to give them a challenge. It's healthier for them. And with contra freeloading, that the whole premise is that they want to work for their food. They want it. They want a challenge. The last thing we won't spend much time on, but it's audition and hearing and how we know that birds respond to certain sounds because they repeat them back to us. And sometimes they're annoying when they do it. I have a bird that picked up on the incubator, the egg incubator signal I have, and now that's all it does. And I don't know why. Because it barely goes off. You almost never hear it. I don't have the incubator going all the time. So, but for some reason, that bird liked that sound, and it was enough to repeat it. And I know some of you, the birds mimic the microwave and things like that. But so there is something to audition and how we can introduce different sounds to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Robbin, did you want to say anything about that?
Just there's a device, and I've talked about it before. It's called an identifier, and you can get different cards to put in it, and sometimes it's it can be passerines, it can be birds of prey, and you just have to push a button. And if you're cleaning a series of aviaries, you can put it in your pocket and you can press the button, and you've got auditory enrichment, and it's very easy to do. It's not expensive. You don't want to use the birds of prey with a prey species for any prolonged period of time, because now you're creating way too much stress. I am a firm believer that stress, adding some stress is beneficial, and Melissa may be disagreeing as a veterinarian, but adding some stressors are okay. And I think auditory is a way to do that.
I'm okay with stressors.
Okay, good.
It's real
I,
life.
it builds coping skills,
I saw so many people, I think, in veterinary medicine trying to shelter
Mhm.
every single, like, or how, oh my gosh, I'd go to examine somebody got a new baby, African gray it was. And I came in and, introduce, kind of, do the thing, but they were just so shocked that it liked me. And I'm like, why wouldn't you one, I hope you want it to like everyone, like let's kind of work on that socialization thing. But it was more of that aspect of I wasn't afraid of it and I just kind of started to play with it. But it was so sad to kind of hear them be so shocked that their bird could handle anything new, and I'm like, I really want your bird to handle something new because I'm going to restrain it right now, or I'm going to, there's always things in veterinary medicine that are not pleasant. If I have to trim nails, if I have to do, as much as I would love for everybody to be trained when they come to me, my reality of my world is sometimes I got to grab them and get it done. And especially in wild animals, things like that, it's like there's no option for, training it to accept something, or so to me stress is always a fact of life, and I think we're doing them a huge disservice if we don't, like you say. I loved that idea of rotating their cages. Why didn't I ever think of that? Like, just stick my birds in the other bird's cage. They always go in there on their own anyhow. They go into, Squiggy was in Taxi's cage, and you're like, oh, get the hell out of there. I'm like, why didn't I let them sleep over?
And we're seeing the same thing with humans right now with their inability to cope. We've raised a generation where we've tried to keep them happy all the time, and then they can't cope. And so I have university students who they just cannot cope with any challenge, any little thing, and they've been told, oh, if it's okay if you can't do something. Well, no, you need to figure out how to do something. You need to figure out life. You need to figure out how to function, and you need to figure out how to cope. And unfortunately, we've not done a real good job over the last generation with that. And that I see that people doing that to their animals, and making it, oh, my bird needs to be happy all the time. My bird needs to be with me all the time. I need to stay at home all weekend because he gets upset if I'm not there. You need to get your bird accustomed to being without you, with you there, with other people there, and that's just healthy. That's just healthy, and that extreme attachment doesn't do anybody. Your bird doesn't need you. It needs food, but your bird doesn't need you all the time. Like, you gotta. It's just not healthy for the bird to make those assumptions. So. I know we're over time. Last thing, one time around, Robbin, Melissa, Lara, that you've been great through this whole thing. This has been such a great conversation. What's one recommendation you'd like to tell people when it comes to enriching the senses? What's one thing that you could recommend to somebody as something that they could do?
So it's more of a challenge than a recommendation. When you're creating enrichment opportunities, try to include as many of the senses in one. If you can get, gustation, olfaction, which they kind of go hand in hand, with the touch, with the tactile, it's just challenge yourself to see how many you can add to one opportunity, and then observe what happens and see what kind of behavior, if any behavior change happens.
So as many senses, try to capture as many senses as possible.
Yep.
Good. Melissa?
Yep. So, okay. So I'm gonna one up that challenge. So you got that challenge going. I wanted to challenge everybody. Try essential oils once. There's so many different ways to do it. One of my favorite ways with birds is we have two different products, Feathered and Feathered Plus, that are made, and there's other ones, but made specifically to go in a water spray. shake it up and mist it on them, because they're missing out on rain for the most part, unless you're lucky enough to have an outdoor aviary. I'm in Minnesota, very, very hard to do most of the year. But there's such, I almost can't even describe to you what you'll start to see, because everybody sees something very cool. Everybody sees something very different. You may not always know what your goal was in doing it, but try anything. Try one, and I'll preface it with, please don't get just any essential oil. That is the one rule. As much as I love them, you can do harm. Okay? So don't think like, oh, like I can do any essential oil. But when you're traveling, so that's one thing I find is like, so maybe you can't find good lavender flowers, or they're only available certain times of the year. Essential oils are always shelf stable and they can travel with you easily. I do a lot where I put it on me, or maybe I'll rub some into the carrier of the animal, bottom of the cage, in their misting water. There's so many, you can put it on the perches. So for those ones now that, need to follow a scent, maybe you don't have access to the fresh or the dried or the freeze dried at that time, or you're traveling, or, there's always some reason. So for me, like, I feel like add essential oils in. It's always appropriate with any other modality you're doing, but the layering of it is so, but it's very powerful. So that would be part of my challenge, is like, not only do all your enrichment, see what an essential oil being added into that fresh, and because once we dry things too, there's certain components that are going to leave it. So it's still there somewhat, but it's a little bit different. And I think that would be my biggest thing, is just, you'll never know what you're going to see until you try it. And it's pretty fun.
And I think a lot of people think, when they think essential oils, they think you're doing like highly concentrated diffusing in the house. And I know respiratory issues with birds, that's a worry for people. But like you just said, there's many different ways that you can use those and still have a huge, huge benefit from them.
Yeah, with birds, you would only use a water-based diffuser.
Mm-hmm.
So never the, straight up ones. But it's amazing actually what, we've treated aspergillosis and things with, like, even like, tenting them with them. So they're a lot, there's so many fallacies out there about it. But there's so much more you can do than you'd ever expect. It's pretty cool.
We're going to have you on just to do an episode, because I know that's a huge topic and there's a ton of myths out there about it. So
oh yeah, definitely.
We'll debunk it. Lara, you can finish this off.
And Melissa, I'm going to be reaching out to you too, because you just gave me an idea and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to incorporate this.
All right.
I'm going to recommend, I said earlier, keep your birds used to change. I'm going to say, try to find one thing you can do to begin on a daily basis to incorporate change into each one of your birds' lives. Start with one, and you're going to shape your own behavior of thinking this doesn't have to be a grueling task. And see how your bird responds to it, and watch for signs of, okay, maybe I'm taking too big of steps. But you can incorporate change through foraging, through the different foods you're offering, through training. And that is, and Melissa, you gave me an idea about the training with the teas, because I'm doing medication training right now with one of my birds who I was told was petrified of syringes. And I think I'm going to use the tea as the behavior he's going to, I don't know, we might use it as the reinforcer, we'll see. But it's a way to get him to drink more of the teas. I can shape that behavior. He drinks it anyways, but not in large quantities, and I want him to drink more. So my recommendation is try to find, to start, one small change you can incorporate into your parrot's life through one of these ways that we've discussed today. And then next week, depending on how many birds you have, find two different things you can do per bird per day to incorporate some type of change.
Sound advice. my recommendation is diversify the diet. Stop giving 75% of one thing and make sure that they're getting lots of different things and keep it mixed up. Don't give them the same thing in every day. Just, mix it up as much as you can. Just a couple quick questions on the chat. Do they get the same benefits from the tea if used as a dry ingredient? They get some benefit, but they really get the max when you brew it. You're releasing those helpful, beneficial nutrients into the water. So it's much more powerful if they're getting it brewed as a tea. And you can cold brew too. You just throw a handful of tea in some filtered water, put it in a pitcher, leave it on the counter or in the fridge, and next morning it's ready to go. So another question, do you have any suggestions for getting birds to go after those orange nuts that are in your hunt house? Yeah, no, just like any other food, if they're not accustomed to them, offer them by themselves and first thing in the morning and see if you can get them to go when they're hungriest after them. I have taken them to a cheese grater and shaved the palm nuts, because the outside is where the beta carotene is and the helpful stuff. So I just shave it and mix that with food or sprinkle that on food. So you have to experiment. Keeping birds is a scientific experiment that never ends. So you're constantly experimenting. So the websites, here's where you can find the three of these lovely ladies, the animalbehaviorcenter.com, animaleo.info, and the leatherelves.equid.com. I will post these links on YouTube under the chat in the description, so that when if you want to watch this again, all of that information will also be there. So thank you everybody for your attention. We appreciate everybody being part of this tonight. We hope you enjoyed this. I know I did, and I'm so grateful to all of you for being here tonight. We really appreciate your expertise, and I'm sure we will see all of you on another episode of Go Wild soon. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.